Hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. It's DMG, and welcome back to Blitz. And today I'm going to be doing kind of a comparison branch review. I'm still going to put this under the tank reviews section and see how you like it. Today we're going to be looking at German tank destroyers and really questioning if they are overpowered or not. Now today we are going to see the Jagdpanzer IV first from Adrian de God, and despite some poor driving at the beginning of this match, you will see why the Jagdpanzer IV is possibly, or undoubtedly, the most overpowered Tier 6 tank destroyer in the game right now. Now, what do we think about when we think of tank destroyers? DPM, camouflage. The Jagdpanzer has both, boasting a pretty decent camouflage coefficient due to its small profile, and it has a touch of armor that allows it to maybe bounce a shot if it gets spotted. Nothing that would be too crazy to rely on, but enough to control the enemy. Now, the Jagdpanzer IV, 3,265 DPM. That is more than its Tier 7 counterpart, or premium counterpart, the E25, which only has a hair under 3,000. And another interesting thing is that the Alpha is even more than the E25, and most people think that in the trade-off between DPM and Alpha, you usually have one or the other. But the Jagdpanzer, or Jagdpanzer IV, has both in its favor compared to its Tier 7 counterpart. And it is Tier 6. You can see Adrian just mowing down targets as he takes out that T-37, and he will soon be going into the AMX or the VK, right? Now, the shell velocity is not necessarily the best. You know, the 773 millimeters of shell velocity is not great. It's definitely less than, let's say, the E25 at Tier 7, but we are talking about Tier 6 if we're going to talk about more average statistics of this vehicle. Now, if we compare it to, let's say, you know, the tank that has the next highest DPM, which would be the Churchill gun carrier, the gun carrier only has 878 millimeters, not millimeters, goodness, right? Shell velocity, or meters per second shell velocity. But the important part is that the Jagdpanzer IV has such a higher DPM level, almost 700 in total, higher DPM than the Churchill gun carrier, allowing it to just mow down enemies. There is nothing like this at this tier. You can sit in camouflage and just absolutely pick apart your enemies with a respectable alpha gun and do it at a very high rate of fire. And also, when you put the equipment on this thing, like the supercharge, the enhanced HP, the refined gun, or the vertical stabilizer, it just really kicks out its ability to the max and allows it to do this burn them down kind of job. And you're going to watch Adrian just burn down this SU-100 here when his teammate takes the shot, and Adrian's going to come around. Adrenaline allows you to really pump out your DPM, but Adrian doesn't even need it here, even though he comes a little bit late, as 3 shots for the Jagdpanzer IV comes in about 8 seconds. So it's quite easy for Adrian to handily finish off that game with a Mastery Badge and a Radley Walters medal. However, that is probably the most blatant example of OP for German tank destroyers. Now we're going to talk more about the Tier 8 variants of them, or I would say more popular or more well-known, right? A lot of people like to talk about the Rheinmetall Borsig Waffenträger and the ISU-152, and we are going to see that today. So the Borsig, this is myself, and this is a Castilla game I had yesterday, actually. Borsig versus ISU. This is a common question that I get in my inbox or in my Ask Dark channel on Discord. Which is better? For my money, I do think the Borsig is better. A lot of people like to point to DPM numbers, which is great. A lot of people like to point to the accuracy numbers of the ISU-152, which is very valid. But I think a lot of people underestimate the significance of camouflage that a tank destroyer has. And, you know, accuracy may be worse on the Borsig, but it seems to work just fine right there, putting in a shot at long range on that IS-3. And you're just going to see me camp. And all throughout this replay that you're watching right now, notice how good the camouflage is on this tank. You're especially going to see this later in the game when it comes in handy in a 3 versus 1 situation. Or what turns into a 3 versus 1. Anyways, no spoilers too much, right? Now, the ISU has 600, roughly, more DPM than the Borsig. But keep in mind that it doesn't have a turret. So in order to use that DPM to the fullest, or maybe to get shots, right, the enemy has to stay in front of it, and that gun arc is not necessarily the best. The gun arc on the Borsig, of course, is 180 degrees. However, on the ISU, it is much, much less. It's only, what? Let's see. 8 degrees. So you have to stay in front of that small, narrow field of fire for the ISU's gun to really hurt you. But for the Borsig, you can reset. You know, you can just keep your camo and just continue firing. And that's what you're going to see, of course, in the next replay. But in this replay, you saw fantastic camo saved my skin against the T49 right there. And that's something that the ISU is probably not going to do. And right here, you see an ISU in the screen to my right, or off to my right, and you're going to see him get absolutely wrecked in just a moment. Because while both tanks lack armor, and while the ISU supposedly has better armor than the Borsig, the aesthetic design of the tank does not allow it to survive very long. As you can see, it went from like full health to 0 right there in that moment. That ISU is out of the game. Do you want to know why? It's because the corners of the tank are just so large on that superstructure, and it doesn't allow for you to hull down or hide very well. There's a lot of situations in hull down or corner poking where you will be able to see the ISU and shoot the corners of the tank, but it will not be able to shoot you back, and I assume that's what happened here. I go for that T49 in that moment, knowing that the longer my gun is in the game, the better, and if that means taking out the T49 first to prevent that derp cannon from getting anywhere near my tissue box platform. So that allows me to take out the T49, then deal with the CDC, and then my friend deals with the super Pershing. Good stuff there. But I hope you're seeing why the Borsig is better than the ISU. Now, that's not to say that the ISU is a terrible tank. It isn't. If you can set up that situation where you are camouflaged enough and you can just put shots downrange with 3,168 DPM, that's great. You will shred them faster than the Borsig. However, if you can't, and you're going to be turning your turret and breaking your camo, which means you're going to have to be re-aiming, resetting your camo, you know, that may give you not as much time on target, and it may cheat you out of some shots, whereas the Borsig, that does not happen. Now, the ISU 152 does have better shell velocity than the Borsig. I do think that is something that the ISU really does have going for it. But then again, you know, the amount of time you have to spend adjusting your aim on the ISU 152 is far greater than that of the Borsig. You can just simply turn the turret of the Borsig and absolutely destroy people who are just unknowing as to your location. Another interesting thing is that when you break camo, right, you're more liable to get spotted, and the Borsig rarely ever has to break camo, whereas the ISU 152 does. So does this really mean that German TDs are OP? I feel like the Borsig is definitely better at being a tank destroyer than the ISU, even though the ISU is the classic OG 640 Alpha Tier 8 big dog, right? Another interesting thing that, or I wouldn't say interesting, but common argument for the ISU is its penetration, right? 286 millimeters of standard pen on your AP allows you just to slice right through anything at Tier 8, anything at Tier 7, and yeah, anything at Tier 9, right? Because that's the same amount of penetration you get on the Object 704. And that's great. More penetration is great. But it's sometimes more penetration at the cost of a turret in this case when I compare it to the Borsig. Do you really need 286 millimeters of penetration to go through a Chiri or an IS or a Tiger 1 even when you start getting into Tier 8 and you look at the IS-6, as we're going to see trioed do here, you know, do you really need 286 millimeters of penetration to go through that IS-3? And yes, Trio does miss that shot, but consider if the ISU was playing in this situation. The whole tank would have to turn and have fired, or that camo net might have set, or that camo net might not have set. Maybe Trio would have gotten spotted if he was driving an ISU 152. You're going to see here just putting in shots across, being this invisible death machine. You can see Trio just holding his cards very well, not moving his hull whatsoever, and just playing from his turret and his camouflage, using the strengths of the tank to succeed. But back to my point about penetration. Do you think Trio needs 286 millimeters of penetration to go through that Tiger II? Doesn't really look like it. He's about to put a shot right through the flat side or just slightly angled side of the Tiger II and take it out of the game. That T-34 that you saw that was spotted, that front looks butter compared to the Borsig. Do you really need 286 millimeters and just have complete overkill? I understand when you're firing against, let's say, an E-75 or a ST-1, right? I mean, those are some instances where maybe that 286 is helpful if it shows you a weak plate, right? Or a side. But the Borsig does have better heat penetration with the same alpha. Or actually, excuse me, the Borsig has 5 higher alpha than the ISU on its heat. However, it's, for sake of argument, it's just about the same, right? And the penetration is about the same, or a little bit higher than the ISU's on its heat compared to the ISU's APCR, 334 versus 329. So it's not like if you need to pen, the Borsig is going to lack compared to the ISU. But the amount of camouflage between these two tanks is just quite noticeable. The ISU will have to uncloak more often to get shots, which means more chances for it to get spotted and killed. And guys, on the ISU, you only have 1,000 hit points. And yeah, the Borsig doesn't have that much either and can be HE'd. But if you don't get spotted in the first place, that will save your skin more often. Because in this instance, if you have to back down this ridge on Castilla, that means you're spending another 30 seconds driving up that ridge again, resetting, getting ready, which may cheat you out of shots that the Borsig may be able to get. And you're going to see this right here, or soon enough, as Trio is trying to put in shots against this IS-6. And, you know, the IS-6 has a strong armor profile. It's definitely not on the weaker end. It's not like a T-34. And right there, you see it go right through the weaker plates of the IS-6. And like I said, it's not an ISU in terms of penetration, but it is enough. And that is what is important in this instance. I believe the turret really compensates for any weakness that the ISU, or excuse me, or any weakness that the Borsig has that the ISU doesn't. I think that the strengths of the ISU are just purely overkill and quite unnecessary, but the Borsig is more of the complete package when it comes to a tank destroyer. And yes, you know, that shot does bounce on the IS-6 you see there, using heat. But that's not to say that the ISU wouldn't have completely missed trying to turn its whole hull and face the IS-6 and pen, right? You know, I feel like the ISU 152 with its bloom and its, well, really just terrible bloom and the fact that it has to relocate so much, I feel like that just it's just a game changer and puts the two on equal footing when it comes to hitting shots, right? But 215 on the Borsig's AP is more than enough. You know, people like to talk about 286 being the pinnacle, but when all you really need is 215, I'd rather have other traits at that point. Agreed? I hope so. But if there are still other ISU fans out there, or other, let's say, Tier 6 TD fans, going back to that other Jagdpanzer IV game, please let me know in the comments and why you think your tank destroyer choice is the best, or better than what I am talking about. Now, that was the Borsig. Let's move on to some other games in the Jagdpanther II with Chariot Solace playing on Canyon in one of my favorite Tier 8 tank destroyers. The Jagdpanther II is a very, very strong tank destroyer. It's a rear mount that has gun depression, it has good DPM, it has armor. It's so flexible. I think the Russian counterpart to this would be the Su-101, but it just doesn't stand up, and we can really compare those now as well. You know, the Jagdpanther II has 600 more DPM than the Su-101. It only has 10 millimeters less penetration, but it's still very strong at 246 compared to the Su-101's 258. That's actually 12 millimeters, but right, who's counting at that point? The shell velocity is a little bit less than the Su-101's at 920 versus 940 in the Su-101's favor, but the bloom, the gun depression, the aiming arc is noticeably better, making the Jagdpanther II so much more flexible. Do you think the Su-101 could have gotten away with this on Canyon? I don't think so. It doesn't have the gun depression to work this area. And the Jagdpanther II's superstructure armor profile is absolutely fantastic, and it is very hard to pen for same tier tanks, even higher tier tanks firing heat or their 340 millimeter heat rounds or APCR rounds. It is very hard to pen the superstructure of the Jagdpanther II, without a doubt. The speed is, or the mobility is similar, and while your power to rate ratio isn't as good, you have slightly better, just by 1 kilometer an hour, higher top speed than the Su-101. Your traverse is 2 degrees more, which makes, I would say, a big difference when mediums are trying to circle you, and your terrain resistances are better, which means you are flexible on more maps than the Su-101. But really, the Jagdpanther II's combination of traits really put it above other tank destroyers. Even its German counterpart, the Ferdinand, it has more DPM, more mobility. The only thing that the Ferdinand does a little bit better than the Jagdpanther is that it has 1 degree more gun depression, and then it has exactly 150% of the aiming arc, or in this case total 200% of the aiming arc that the Jagdpanther II does. That would be 15 degrees to each side versus the Jagdpanther's 10. But 10 is nothing to scoff at, right? 10 is a good aiming arc. It's 2 degrees better than the ISU on each side, giving you a total of 4 degrees more. Speaking to other tank destroyers, right? Let's look at the AMX AC MLE 48 and just try and compare. DPM is so much worse. Depression is worse. Your aim time is better on the AMX, but your bloom is noticeably worse. Your speed is noticeably worse. Your terrain resistances are noticeably worse. Your armor is noticeably worse. Notice how the AMX AC MLE 48, that Tier 8 French tank destroyer, has large tumors on its top. This does not exist for the Jagdpanther II and allows it to safely haul down on areas like Canyon. And this is a rear-mounted tank going haul down, or a rear-mounted turretless tank going haul down on Canyon, where turrets and having at least a mid-mount makes such a big difference on your flexibility in that zone of the battlefield. And Cherry just putting in great shots across on multiple different kinds of tanks, using fantastic penetration just to slice through heavy tank armor, providing good DPM and support for his team. Or in this case, he's frontlining essentially, and he's played that role very well. That IS-3 comes across, and you're going to see good gun handling there. It's not really stopping the Jagdpanther II from doing good work against heavy tanks. And see right there, that has 246 millimeters of penetration. If we wanted to make a comparison to the ISU-152, that would have gone through regardless of whether you had the 286 great uber penetration or not. And this is why I do think that German tank destroyers especially at tiers 8 and tier 6, even tier 5 with the Stug 3G, are overpowered. But like I said, this is a tank review, so you are doing good things with this tank should you have the opportunity to play it. It's not so awful that it is unplayable. The grind is not awful for the Jagdpanther II. Maybe you could make the argument for the Borsig, but if you stay in camouflage well and you use the gun well, it shouldn't be too bad. Getting through tier 6 and tier 7 is not awful, and that Emil does have the ridiculous 14 degrees of gun depression for a tank destroyer. But this is Doomy in the Jagdpanther II again, and this is a fantastic game. I'm sure you've seen fantastic games throughout, but this one for me is so good. Now, it's not as exotic in terms of positioning compared to chariots. However, you will just see butt tons, cubic ass loads of damage being put out in this game. And another good thing is that this is the new Vineyards, and as an aside, I will be doing more back to basics videos for those of you that really enjoyed me or really enjoyed my map reviews. Since Vineyards has been reworked, I can continue going down the list now by doing more map reviews and just getting more of them out there. So expect more of that soon if you do enjoy my back to basics videos. And you can see the Jagdpanther II. Accurate fire from long range really makes a difference. Something that I like to compare the Jagdpanther II, or at least in tier 8 to, is looking at it relative to the IS spam in tier 8 heavies, right? People like to drive the IS-5, the Defender, the IS-6, the IS-3, the IS-2SH, the Glacial 112, the WZ-111, which, some of which are almost identical when you compare them, right? But the Jagdpanther II, despite it having a little bit less HP, or I would say noticeably less HP, it has a hell of a lot more DPM and a hell of a lot more alpha. 460 stings at tier 10. 460 at tier 8 really stings, okay? It's not something that you can just easily shrug off. It's not like a Chi-Ri or a Comet is firing at you, or a T-34 at tier 5 is firing at you. You can say, oh, it's just one shot. I can trade with this. When you are in an IS-3, you have about 1500 HP. You are a 4-shot kill for this Jagdpanther II. And if you guys are playing Hull Down War, okay, you won't really pen each other. Right? The Jagdpanther II can hull down against an IS-3. The Jagdpanther II can pen a turret of a Defender with APCR and hull down against its heat rounds. The Jagdpanther II can hull down against an IS-6 and pen its turret with its APCR or its AP. But the IS-6 can't pen it back. The Defender can't pen it back. This is what makes the Jagdpanther II so broken. And for me, you can abuse hull down and have more DPM and more alpha than tier 8 heavies. If you get first shot advantage against any of these guys, you're going to kill them. In a DPM war, you're just superior, except maybe to the Defender, who can one-clip you if you are not running the enhanced HP. And that's something that's really up to your personal preference, whether you want to strengthen the hull armor just a tad, or whether you want that extra HP for a little bit longer durability against those Defenders and your special IS-3 Defender, which can take you out in a single clip, like I said, if you don't run the enhanced HP. Doomy is using bushes right now, and that is so important, as he just puts one right through the side of the T-54. Lovely snapshot right there. That is perfect play. And as you can see right there, the hull armor is nothing to scoff at, bouncing a shot when it's angled. It's not awful like the ISU-152 or the Borsig, right? It can bounce shots, and if Doomy goes hull down, that medium tank has absolutely zero chance of penetrating. Doomy does manage to find a way to get out of this situation right now, as there was a tank to his right and a tank in front of him. He does manage to back up and get out of it. But there is another tank even farther to his right, and he needs to get into a safe position. He's surrounded right now and is not a good position to be in when you're in a turretless tank destroyer. Puts in a lovely shot against that Super Pershing right there into the top of the turret, and 246 millimeters of penetration is more than enough. And it's funny because the Super Pershing at the end does call Doomy a gold noob, which is just ridiculous because if, you know, gold has less alpha, and if you can't deal with it now, I really don't know what to tell you. You know, and that wasn't even a gold round anyway. That was just your regular AP. It's just that I think that just speaks to how good the Jagdpanther's penetration is, or the fact that the Super Pershing does not know how his armor profile works. One of the two, right? But for the purpose of this review, we'll just say it's the Jagdpanther's fantastic AP penetration. That Leopard PTA has good DPM, right? You're talking about 3,000 DPM, but the Leopard PTA has roughly the same DPM as the Jagdpanther, and the Jagdpanther has more alpha. So in situations where you can keep it in front of you, the Jagdpanther wins. So that's my comparative branch review right now. Let me know if you like it. I know it wasn't as specific and a little bit more broad than maybe some of you would have liked. Just let me know in the comment section what you think, if you think that this style of review is something that you would like to see more of. Fantastic game for Doomy there. Amazing stuff, you know, or I would just say for everyone. And let us know what, or let me know what you think the best replay is. Anyways, if you like that content, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you didn't, please leave your constructive criticism in the comment section. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to share my passion with you today, and I hope to see you next time.